For more, let's welcome in Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. He's a member of the Banking, Intelligence, and Armed Services Committee, and his book, a New York Times bestseller, Sacred Duty, is available now. Senator, thanks for joining us this morning. Where do we stand now in terms of the scuttlebutt about whether tariffs are removed? Now, it seems like maybe we're saying not so fast on some of this stuff instead of that's usually what we're hearing from China that the markets respond to. Where are we?
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me. I think it's important to remember that tariffs are not the policy here. The policy is to get China to stop its unfair trade practices. Tariffs were simply the president's tool. So if in either a preliminary or some kind of larger deal to come, you could get a workable dispute resolution mechanism, some kind of guaranteed enforcement measures to make sure that China would uphold its end of the bargain, as they often haven't had in past years, then the tariffs would no longer be necessary. So I think the debate right now is to make sure that we have a tool in place to hold China to its word, whether that's tariffs that remain in place or whether it's some kind of dispute resolution mechanism.
Where are we in terms of progress on the really contentious issues? Is there any hope that something's done in phase one on those things, or is that too much to expect?
I have my doubts about that, Joe, that we'd have a sweeping agreement in a phase one deal that touched on some of these contentious issues, especially some of the issues that straddle not just economic matters, but security matters, like China's support for Huawei and ZTE and other telecom companies are essentially the arm of the Chinese Communist Party that they're using to try to build the next generation of wireless networks around the world. I think the agreement, if it happens, will be somewhat cabined. It'll be focused on some of the lower hurdles, such as buying more agricultural products or stopping some of the obvious theft of intellectual property of American businesses, like counterfeiting or demands for joint ventures. Some of those things that are really central to the Chinese Communist Party's business model, I know they want to kick the can down the road on in hopes that they can either get tariff relief up front without some kind of workable enforcement mechanism, and maybe even kick them past the election next year and hope that they can get a Democratic president who will be softer on China.
Well, that's the calculus that we're all trying to figure out in the real world, Senator. I'm wondering how you look at that calculus now. I know you've seen the new highs in our averages here, and the jobs number was pretty good. We see some data out of China that's maybe not quite as good, but not horrible either. Who do you feel has the upper hand right now? But it's November, right? I mean, once we pass over into next year and that election is front and center, it just seems like President Trump is, unlikely to want to take this all the way. Or is he? What's the calculus on having this go all the way to November? Does it help him or hurt him?
Well, Joe, my calculus, and I believe the president's calculus, is what's best for American workers and American families, whether that means a deal that can be consummated in the next month, or the next 3 months, or a year or 2 years from now. What's best for American workers to stop China's unfair trade practices that they have used against the United States for more than 30 years. In terms of who's got the most leverage, I have no doubt, though, that it's the United States. Yes, we have an election coming up, but as you say, and as y'all were talking earlier, we have a very strong economy. Unemployment numbers are as low as they've been since Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And they're as low as they've ever been for, say, African Americans or Hispanics in our country. Our economy is still strong, it's still growing, it's still leading the world. China's economy is riddled with challenges and problems, and even though it's not a democracy, Xi Jinping certainly has his own internal politics that he has to deal with, both at the popular level, as you see in places like Hong Kong, and also his own elites in Beijing.
And the calculus on who China would prefer to win the election, I'm not sure we know that either. You said maybe get a Democrat, but some Democrats talk tougher than even the president, or seem more intransigent than the president.
Well, I'm very confident that the Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party would like to roll their dice on a future Democrat.
You think so?
Well, given how tough that President Trump has been on China, and the first president of either party to take the Chinese threat seriously, really. I mean, you just talk about Democrats talking a tough game. Yeah, they have. Look at Bill Clinton. He said that he was going to crack down on China, and he immediately rolled over. Barack Obama did the same thing. The Democratic Party has a history of talking tough on China until they get in the White House, and they immediately roll over.
Right. I mean, I want to talk on China. I know that's what we're supposed to talk about here, Senator, but I just want to ask you, as we watch on a daily basis more and more of the testimony about Ukraine. If it becomes clear that maybe there was an implied quid pro quo, implied or overt otherwise, even if that was on the table, would that cause you to at that point feel that's enough for an impeachment, to vote yes on a conviction?
Joe, it's hard to assess that testimony and evidence because of the way it's leaked out in a selective fashion.
Let's assume there was that. Let's assume he said, okay, he said it, that we said it this way. To get this aid, I want you to start rooting out corruption, whether it's 2016 election corruption, whether it's overall, where's all this money going? I want you to look at the Bidens. All those things were together, and there was a quid pro quo. Does that rise to the level of a high crime and misdemeanor?
Well, so first, Joe, let me just say that it's hard to take a step back from that process because it's hard to assess what that evidence is when it's leaked in a selective fashion.
Okay.
But as you put it, the president has genuine concerns about corruption in Ukraine, which unfortunately has one of the worst corruption problems in the world. Just last month, the International Monetary Fund declined to extend a credit facility to Ukraine because they think even this new president is not yet taking the steps necessary to crack down on corruption. And it's been reported by a senior political reporter at the New York Times that Ukrainian officials in their prior administration interfered in the 2016 election. There's an obvious, glaring conflict of interest between Joe Biden being the Obama administration's point person on Ukraine at the time that his son was getting $50,000 to $80,000 a month from a Ukrainian oligarch who was being investigated for corruption. I think those are reasonable and legitimate questions for our administration to explore. They're reasonable concerns for the American people to have, just like they were for the International Monetary Fund to have.
Yep. I'm just trying to sift through all the noise that we hear every day when it's breathlessly reported that this new info comes out. But if it all was out and everything came out and there was quid pro quo, I'm just still wondering whether you go through the process, divisive,
Joe,
what we're going to see, and then you're going to get 0 votes in the Senate. Why go through it? I don't know.
Well, so Joe, let me be clear about this. This information that comes out every day, it's not a leak, it's a plant. It's shifty Adam Schiff leaking and planting in selective fashion to try to put the president in the worst possible light. The Democrats said, though, that they could both impeach the president and continue to work on the people's agenda. Fortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case, and it's really disappointing. The Senate Democrats won't let us pass a defense spending bill. The House Democrats won't vote on the Mexico-Canada agreement. These are real, tangible things that our people need that the Democrats aren't proceeding on because they're too busy impeaching the president.
All right. Well, Senator, thank you. We'll get back to China and trade and markets and everything else, but we appreciate your comments there as well.